Hello and welcome back to FiddleUP. I'm Emerald Ray, and today I'm going to tell you how to work on your tone. And so I've had a lot of requests for how do I get great tone, and I'm going to explain to you how to get great tone, but I'm also going to explain to you how to get any tone. Because as you know, I like working with texture and grit and all of that in-betweeny stuff. I'm not a firm believer that all tone has to be pretty. There's pretty good, very classic, clean sound, and then there's also like pure, dirty rock and roll in there. And I'm going to show you how to get both of those things actually, and how to control it so that you can do both and you can flip back and forth and do all kinds of fun stuff. So getting tone of any kind is a balance of pressure and speed. So what is pressure? And I will say before we get started in this video that I would highly recommend you go through the basic beginner section. I have a video on how to do a bow hold. If you need to sort anything out in terms of how you're holding your bow, I would do that first before you start working on this stuff, because this is kind of after that. You have to get set up in the right position to do what you need to do. And I would also highly suggest that you watch the video in the technique session about bow holds. And that talks about the different types of bow holds and what they're used for. And you can decide which bow hold you want to use for this. So I would just suggest you get settled into a place, into some kind of comfortable spot with your positioning before you start working on this stuff. But you don't have to at the end of the day. If you're comfortable where you are and you want to just get started with this, then let's get going. So pressure is obviously, and I left my tuner on here. So pressure is obviously how much pressure is going on to the string. That's pretty obvious. One thing that a lot of people don't know is that your bow is perfectly balanced to make the right noise. Just it's the correct weight all the way down and all the way up. So that is why it's shaped the way it is. That is why it's bowed this way instead of this way like it used to be. And that's why it only weighs a certain amount. It's going to be somewhere between, I think, 55 and 65 grams is all your bow. All bows weigh that amount. So, the difference between a heavy bow and a light bow is really not that much, like really not that much, just a matter of a few grams. And all of that is completely up to the person. Some people like a lighter bow, some people like a heavier bow, and that is really up to the personal preference, how it feels in your hands, how you like to play. Me personally, just in case you're interested, I like a nice light bow with a nice light tip because I like to be able to have a lot of control. So I can kind of pivot and do anything that I want at any time. And I find that a lighter bow helps me to do that. Other people find that a heavier bow helps them to do that. So again, that is completely 100% subjective to the person, whether a heavy bow or a light bow feels good to you. There is no right and wrong there. However, the bow, heavy or light, is still exactly the right weight to get a good tone out of your instrument. It's the starting baseline. So when you're playing your A string, you should be able to you can take all your fingers off and just have the bow on the string. And you should be able, and I'm taking my fingers off just to be extra dramatic, but you don't have to do that. Don't throw your bow around. I'm just showing you, I'm just demonstrating that I really am just dragging the bow across. I'm not putting any weight. And that's actually where you want to start from. So you want to actually sit there and play some nice long bows and not put any pressure on the bow at all, and get used to just what your bow feels like. And so you're going to find that a certain speed is, you know, good enough. Just a nice kind of mid-speed. And just get used to that before you start adding any other stuff. So, and then from there, you want to start working on your other strings. And you're going to notice that the lower strings, especially on the G string, you have to go slower. So just in talking about the speed for a second, here's how speed works. So speed has to do with the actual vibrations that are coming out of the string. And when the string is low, like your G string, you know, your open G string, that's the lowest note you can play, I can actually go at a very slow speed. And I can even dig in a little bit. I can even put some more pressure on that. So that is slow bow with some extra pressure right there. And I can even go pretty slow and put quite a bit of pressure before it starts to get into the grit zone. And if I go a little bit faster, I can put a little bit more pressure. Now, if I were to do that on the E string at that speed and that pressure, it would sound like this. Good grief. Why is that happening? So that is that is happening because the E string vibrates at a much higher rate than the G string. So the vibrations are trying to happen and they can't, so they're getting stuck. They're literally getting I'm trying to sing, but I have no air. That kind of sound. So really tune in to what is happening with your fiddle. The fiddle is so close to the voice, it's kind of ridiculous, but that is literally what I'm trying to sing and I have no air. Give me some air. So if you want to put any sort of pressure at all, I mean, I wouldn't on the E string, honestly. The E string is so delicate that it's really hard to put pressure on. So if you're struggling with your E string, just like let the bow do it. Don't add any pressure at all. The bow, you know, and you have to put some speed on your E string. You know, to get a good tone out of your E string. So it's not sounding, you know, like you say, you don't have any of that grit happening on your E string, which is, grit is great. Not so much on the E string. It's kind of like you gotta really be sparing with it. So there's a lot to this. But anyway, so that speed thing explains why when you see classical violinists that are playing way the heck up here and their bow is going like 100,000 miles an hour up at the top to the point where it looks comical, that's why, because they're playing up so high, the string needs all of the air possible. It needs all of the bow speed to manage all of those vibrations that are happening. So that's why you get a really just hilariously fast bow on the top tippity top end of your instrument, which I'm not even going to demonstrate that. It's just too ridiculous. But that is why. So in terms of how to get a great tone, I would say start with just the bow weight and get used to that. Get yourself a nice solid baseline default tone that you really love, that you feel comfortable in and that you can just switch into, and that is your nice tone that you use most of the time. And, you know, practice that to the point where it's very automatic. And, you know, one thing that's really good to do is practice all your tunes slow. So use the weight of the bow and just get used to the speed, you know, on the different strings and then in the different places. And start from there and get happy with what you have with your baseline tone. After that, you can start playing around with some really fun stuff. So that you know, lots of pressure on your G string sound. You know, getting a growl on the bottom of your G string is a really cool tone to get. And, you know, it's really, there's a lot of expression in there. So a lot of expression happens when you're kind of leaving the bass line tone and doing some other stuff. But you want to make sure you're doing these things purposefully. Therefore, you don't feel like it's happening by accident and you're out of control of it. So playing around with the different types of pressure, making some bad noises on purpose, like I said, playing around with that, go ahead and play around with the pressure, play around with the speed. It really is very intuitive once you get into it. It's not something that you even should be thinking about too much, like beyond just watching this video and being aware of these things. I wouldn't spend a huge amount of time like practicing some kind of exercises or whatever. Just be aware of the fact that when your fiddle feels like it's choking, like it doesn't have enough air, it needs more bow. It might need more speed. And if things are sounding wishy-washy, that's the other end of the spectrum. If you have too little pressure and too much speed, that's when everything starts to sound glassy, but that's a great tone too. You can absolutely use that for, you know, so I don't know, you know, we can kind of use that in a slow air or something. You know, you can kind of use that glassiness to get some kind of effect or expression out of your instrument. You can use the grit. We've talked about grit a lot. You can use grit in your triplets and all of that. So all of these different tones and textures are things that you can use artistically. So the more time that you spend A, trying to get your bass line, and then B, allowing yourself to explore these different textures, you know, the glassy light texture or the, you know, really gritty darkness of your instrument, the more you're going to have a better understanding of how these things work. And if you do them by accident, which will happen, you will kind of get a feel for how to get out of it. You will have more of a feel on how to change what you're doing in the moment, in the instant that you're in it, and how to change your mind. And you will have this whole palette of sounds that you can use to speak. And that is what makes up like a huge amount of expression and musicality, is using that wide palette of tones and textures to just kind of be constantly expressing a thought in your music. And this is something that you can do in fiddle music. And that although fiddle music is a bit formulaic, and it has to do with the, you know, all the different genres that we're talking about, there's kind of specific things that you do. There's a lot of wiggle room for you to put your own voice in there. And this is how you do it. You use the fiddle as a voice, and you use the bow or your lungs and your articulations and all that. And I would go ahead and check out in the pro section, there's a video on musicality, and you can start to think about, you know, the wider reaches of your musicality and all the different things that you like and that you don't like, and you know, kind of curating your own sound. So that's what I have to say about tone. I hope that was helpful, and I hope you are able to use this to find your baseline tone and all of your other expressive techniques that you're going to use in the future. And I will see you in the next video.